guys, this is Link here from my backyard. I really miss having you guys in class and I really wish we could get together and do this, but you know, we're all doing our part to stay safer at home, and I hope you guys are all healthy and happy and doing well and finding some time to read this great book that we're reading for class. I wanted to do a read along of chapter 1. We haven't really gotten into it yet. We did get to start the book together, just intro the book, but I kind of left you on your own to read. So whether you've read chapter 1 already and we just need to go over some things, or whether you haven't read it and you're wanting to read it together, now's the time for that. So follow along in your books. I've got mine here. It looks a little different on the cover than yours, but follow along in your books. We're going to read chapter 1 from The Outsiders. When I stepped out into the bright sunlight from the darkness of the movie house, I had only two things on my mind: Paul Newman and a ride home. I was wishing I looked like Paul Newman. He looks tough and I don't. But I guess my own looks aren't so bad. So, our narrator here is telling us about a famous movie star, Paul Newman, who in that time was kind of a tough guy and really attractive movie star. So think of one of the popular movie stars from our day. It's kind of who he's comparing himself to. He's wishing he looked like him. I have light brown, almost red hair and greenish gray eyes. I wish they were more gray, because I hate I wish they were more gray, because I hate most guys that have green eyes. But I have to be content with what I have. My hair is longer than a lot of boys wear theirs, squared off in back and long in the front and on sides. But I am a greaser, and most of my neighborhood rarely bothers to get a haircut. Besides, I look better with long hair. So he calls himself a greaser, and we talked about that before we left class, that the greasers were one of the gangs in this book that we'd be reading about. So we already know who our narrator identifies, and that's as a greaser. I had a long walk home and no company, but I usually loan it anyway. For no reason except that I like to watch movies undisturbed, so I can get into them and live them with the actors. When I see a movie with someone, it's kind of uncomfortable, like having someone read your book over your shoulder. I'm different that way. I mean, my second oldest brother, Soda, who is 16 going on 17, never cracks a book at all. And my oldest brother, Daryl, who we call Derry, works too long and hard to be interested in a story or drawing a picture. So I'm not like them. And nobody in our gang digs movies and books the way I do. For a while there, I thought I was the only person in the world that did, so I loaned it. Soda tries to understand, at least, which is more than Derry does. But then, Soda is different from anybody. He understands everything, almost. Like he's never hollering at me the way Derry is, or treating me as if I was 6 instead of 14. I love Soda more than I've ever loved anyone, even Mom and Dad. He's always happy-go-lucky and grinning, while Derry's hard and firm and rarely grins at all. But then Derry's gone through a lot in his 20 years, grown up too fast. Soda Pop will never grow up at all. I don't know which way's the best. I'll find out one of these days. So, we've already learned a couple things about our main character here, the narrator. His name is Ponyboy, which we haven't found out yet, but I'll tell you that much, so that'll help you on your study guides. So we're hearing from Ponyboy right now, and he tells us about his brothers. Soda, who they call Soda or Soda Pop, is 16 going on 17. He's just kind of close to your guys' age. And he tells us about his brother Derry, who's a really hard worker, and Derry is 20 years old. Our main character, Ponyboy, is 14. So again, kind of close to your guys' age. Anyway, I went on walking home, thinking about the movie, then suddenly wishing I had some company. Greasers can't walk alone too much, or they'll get jumped, or someone will come by and scream, "Greaser!" at them, which doesn't make you feel too hot, if you know what I mean. We get jumped by the socias. I'm not sure how you spell it, but it's the abbreviation for socials. The jet set, west side, rich kids. It's like the term greaser, which is used to class all us boys on the east side. So you've got greasers on the east side and socials on the west side. And that's one of the things we talked about in class before we left. We're poorer than the socials and the middle class. I reckon we're wilder too. Not like the socials who jump greasers and wreck houses and throw beer blasts for kicks and get editorials in the paper for being a public disgrace one day and an asset to society the next. Greasers are almost like hoods. We steal things and drive old souped up cars and hold up gas stations and have a gang fight once in a while. I don't mean I do things like that. Derry would kill me if I got in trouble with the police. Since Mom and Dad were killed in an auto wreck, the three of us get to stay together only as long as we behave. So Soda and I stay out of trouble as much as we can, and if we're careful not to get caught when we can't. I only mean that most greasers do the things like that. Just like we wear our hair long and dress in blue jeans and t-shirts and leave our shirt tails out and wear leather jackets and tennis shoes or boots. I'm not saying that either socials or greasers are better. That's just the way things are. So when we left off, we talked about what your gang would look like, dress like, act like, some songs that might represent your gang. Ponyboy gives us a little bit of a peek into his gang here, saying that they wear their hair long and dress in blue jeans and t-shirts and leave their shirt tails out and wear leather jackets. So you can kind of get a picture of them a little bit as a group, where a lot of you guys said that your kind of gang of friends wears sweatshirts and jeans, and that's pretty typical for high schoolers. We also find out that some of the behaviors of each of the group, the socials like to throw beer parties and wreck houses, and they're in the paper for being in trouble one day, but then the next day they're these great kids because their families have a lot more money. Greasers, on the other hand, drive old souped up cars, hold up gas stations, and have a gang fight now and then. But Ponyboy tells us, I try not to do that, and neither does my brother, because their parents died. Now, these guys are all pretty young, 14, 16, almost 17, and 20. And their parents died, but they got to stay together because they're staying out of trouble. So Derry, the oldest brother, would be pretty mad if he found out that his brothers were in trouble. So him and Soda Pop try to stay out of trouble. I could have waited to go to the movies until Derry or Soda Pop got off work. They would have gone with me, or driven me there, or walked along, although Soda just can't sit still long enough to enjoy a movie, and they bore Derry to death. Derry thinks his life is enough without inspecting other people's. Or I could have gotten one of the gang to come along, one of the four boys Derry and Soda and I have grown up with and consider family. We're almost as close as brothers. When you grow up in a tight-knit neighborhood like ours, you get to know each other real well. If I had thought about it, I could have called Derry, and he would have come by on his way home and picked me up. Or Two-Bit Matthews, one of our gang, would have come to get me in his car if I had asked him. But sometimes I just don't use my head. It drives my brother Derry nuts when I do stuff like that, because I'm supposed to be smart, and I make good grades, and I have a high IQ and everything, but I don't use my head. Besides, I like walking. I about decided I didn't like it so much, though, when I spotted that red Corvair trailing me. I was almost 2 blocks from home then, so I started walking a little faster. I had never been jumped, but I had seen Johnny after 4 socials got a hold of him, and it wasn't pretty. Johnny was scared of his own shadow after that. Johnny was 16 then. I knew it wasn't any use, though, fast walking. I mean, even before the Corvair pulled up beside me and 5 socials got out. I got pretty scared. I'm kind of small for 14, even though I have a good build. And those guys were bigger than me. I automatically hitched my thumbs in my jeans and slouched, wondering if I could get away if I made a break for it. I remembered Johnny, his face all cut up and bruised, and I had remembered how he'd cried a lot when we found him, half conscious in the corner lot. Johnny had it awful rough at home. It took a lot to make him cry. I was sweating something fierce, although I was cold. I could feel my palms getting clammy and the perspiration running down my back. I get like that when I'm real scared. I glanced around for a pop bottle or a stick or something. Steve Randall, Soda's best buddy, had once held off 4 guys with a busted pop bottle. But there was nothing. So I stood there like a bump on a log while they surrounded me. I don't use my head. They walked around, slowly, silently smiling. "Hey, Grease," one said in an over-friendly voice. "We're gonna do you a favor, Greaser. We're gonna cut all that long, greasy hair off." He had on a Madras shirt. I can still see it. Blue Madras. One of them laughed, then cussed me out in a low voice. I couldn't think of anything to say. There just isn't a whole lot you can say while waiting to get mugged. So I kept my mouth shut. "Need a haircut, Greaser?" The medium-sized blonde pulled the knife out of his back pocket and flipped the blade open. I finally thought of something to say. No. I was backing up away from that knife. Of course I had backed right into one of them. They had me down in a second. They had my arms and legs pinned down, and one of them was sitting on my chest, with his knees on my elbows. And if you don't think that hurts, you're crazy. I could smell English leather shaving lotion and stale tobacco, and I wondered foolishly if I would suffocate before they did anything. I was scared so bad I was wishing I would. I fought to get loose, and almost did for a second. Then they tightened up on me, and the one on my chest slugged me a couple of times, so I lay still, swearing at them between gasps. A blade was held against my throat. "How'd you like that haircut to begin just below the chin?" It occurred to me then that they could kill me. I went wild. I started screaming for soda, dairy, anyone. Someone put his hand over my mouth. And I bit as hard as I could, tasting the blood run through my teeth. I heard a muttered curse and got slugged again. They were stuffing a handkerchief in my mouth. One of them kept saying, "Shut him up, for Pete's sake, shut him up!" Then there were shouts and the pounding of feet, and the Socs jumped up and left me lying there, gasping. I lay there and wondered what in the world was happening. People were jumping all over me and running by me, and I was too dazed to figure it out. Then someone had me under the armpits and was hauling me to my feet. It was Derry. "Are you all right, Pony Boy?" He was shaking me, and I wished he'd stopped. I was dizzy enough anyway. I could tell it was Derry, though, partly because of the voice, and partly because Derry's always rough with me without meaning to be. "I'm okay. Quit shaking me, Derry. I'm okay." He stopped instantly. "I'm sorry." He wasn't really. Derry isn't ever sorry for anything he does. It seems funny to me that he should look just exactly like my father and act exactly opposite from him. My father was only 40 when he died, and he looked 25, and a lot of people thought Derry and Dad were brothers instead of father and son. But they only looked alike. My father was never rough with anyone without meaning to be. Derry is 6'2" and broad-shouldered and muscular. He has dark brown hair that kicks out in front and a slight cowlick in the back, just like Dad's. But Derry's eyes are his own. He's got the eyes that are like 2 pieces of pale blue-green ice. They've got a determined set to them, like the rest of him. He looks older than 20, though. Cool and smart. He would be real handsome if his eyes weren't so cold. He doesn't understand anything that's not plain hard fact, but he uses his head. I sat down again, rubbing my cheek where I'd been slugged the most. Derry jammed his fists in his pockets. "They didn't hurt you too bad, did they?" They did. I was smarting and aching, and my chest was sore, and I was so nervous my hands were shaking, and I wanted to start bawling. But you just don't say that to Derry. "I'm okay." Soda Pop came looping back. By then I had figured that all the noise I had heard was the gang coming to rescue me. He dropped down beside me, examining my head. "You got cut up a little, huh, Pony Boy?" I only looked at him blankly. "I did?" He pulled out a handkerchief, wet the end of it with his tongue, and pressed it gently against the side of my head. "You're bleeding like a stuck pig." "I am?" "Look." He showed me the handkerchief, reddened as if by magic. "Did they pull a blade on you?" I remembered the voice. Need a haircut, greaser? The blade must have slipped when he was trying to shut me up. Yeah. Soda is handsomer than anyone else I know. Not like Derry. Soda's movie star kind of handsome. The kind that people stop on the street to watch go by. He's not as tall as Derry, and he's a little slimmer, but he has a finely drawn, sensitive face that somehow manages to be reckless and thoughtful at the same time. He's got dark gold hair that he combs back, long and silky straight. And in the summer, the sun bleaches it to a shining wheat gold. His eyes are dark brown, lively, dancing recklessly, laughing eyes that can be gentle and sympathetic one moment and blazing with anger the next. He has Dad's eyes, but Soda is one of a kind. He can get drunk in a drag race or dancing without ever getting near alcohol. In our neighborhood, it's rare to find a kid who doesn't drink once in a while. But Soda never touches a drop. He doesn't need to. He gets drunk on just plain living, and he understands everybody. He looked at me more closely. I looked away hurriedly, because, if you want to know the truth, I was starting to bawl. I knew I was as white as I felt, and I was shaking like a leaf. Soda just put his hand on my shoulder. Easy, pony boy. They ain't gonna hurt you no more. I know, I said. But the ground began to blur, and I felt hot tears running down my cheeks. I brushed them away impatiently. I'm just a little spooked, that's all. I drew a quivering breath and quit crying. You just don't cry in front of Derry. Not unless you're hurt, like Johnny had been that day we found him in the vacant lot. Compared to Johnny, I wasn't hurt at all. Soda rubbed my hair. You're an okay kid, Pony. I had to grin at him. Soda can make you grin no matter what. I guess it's because he's always grinning so much himself. You're crazy, Soda. Out of your mind. Derry looked as if he'd like to knock our heads together. You're both nuts. Soda merely cocked one eyebrow, a trick he'd picked up from Two-Bit. It seems to run in this family. Derry stared at him for a second and then cracked a grin. Soda Pop isn't afraid of him like everybody else and enjoys teasing him. I'd just as soon tease a full-grown grizzly. But for some reason, Derry likes to be teased by Soda. Our gang had chased the Socs to their car and heaved rocks at them. They came running toward us now. 4 lean, hard guys. They were all as tough as nails and looked it. I'd grown up with them, and they accepted me, even though I was younger, because I was Derry and Soda's kid brother, and I kept my mouth shut good. Steve Randall was 17, tall and lean, with thick, greasy hair, and he kept it combed in complicated swirls. He was cocky, smart, and Soda's best buddy since grade school. Steve's specialty was cars. He could lift a hubcap quicker and more quietly than anyone in the neighborhood. But he also knew cars upside down and backward, and he could drive anything on wheels. He and Soda worked at the same gas station. Steve worked part-time and Soda full-time, and their station got more customers than any other in town. Whether that was because Steve was so good with cars, or because Soda attracted girls like honey draws flies, I couldn't tell you. I liked Steve only because he was Soda's best friend. He didn't like me. He thought I was a tag-along kid, and a kid. Soda always took me with them when they went places. If they weren't taking girls, that bugged Steve. It wasn't my fault. Soda always asked me. I didn't ask him. Soda doesn't think I'm a kid. So you should have your character chart, and we should be able to fill in a little bit about Steve Randall based on that paragraph. If you're following along, you might want to put a bookmark in it or something, because this is going to help you fill your character chart. Two-Bit Matthews was the oldest of the gang and a wisecracker of the bunch. He was about 6 feet tall, stocky in build, and very proud of his long, rusty-colored sideburns. He had gray eyes and a wide grin, and he couldn't stop making funny remarks to save his life. You couldn't shut up that guy. He always had to get his 2 bits worth in, hence his name. So, this is an older saying, getting his 2 bits in. We say getting his 2 cents in now. So, that's why they call him 2-bit. He's always kind of got to give us his 2 cents worth. Even his teachers forgot his real name was Keith, and we hardly remembered he had one. So this is a kid who they use his nickname so much that they forget his real name. And I think you guys know a couple kids like that at the school, that we use their nickname so much that we don't even know their real name. Life was one big joke to 2-Bit. He was famous for shoplifting and his black-handled switchblade, which he couldn't have acquired without his first talent. And he was always smarting off to the cops. He really couldn't help it. Everything he said was so irresistibly funny that he just had to let the police in on it to brighten up their dull lives. That's the way he explained it to me. He liked fights, blondes, and for some unfathomable reason, school. He was still a junior at 18 and a half, and he never learned anything. He just went for kicks. I liked him real well, because he kept us laughing at ourselves, as well as other things. He reminded me of Will Rogers. Maybe it was the grin. So, you guys should be able to take a second and fill in about 2-Bit there on your character chart. If I had to pick the real character of the gang, it would be Dallas Winston, Dally. So this is the part that might get a little confusing, and this is why I gave you guys a character chart. So we have Dallas Winston, who is Dally, and we have his brother, Daryl, who they call Derry. So there's Derry and Dally, and that's why I gave you guys the character chart, so you can kind of keep all of these gang members straight. So we're going to learn about Dally here. I used to like to draw his picture when he was in a dangerous mood, for then I could get his personality down in a few lines. He had an elfish face with high cheekbones and a pointed chin, small, sharp animal teeth, and ears like a lynx. His hair was almost white, it was so blonde, and he didn't like haircuts, or hair oil either. So it fell over his forehead in wisps, and kicked out in the back in tufts, and curled behind his ears, along the nape of his neck. His eyes were blue, blazing ice cold, with a hatred of the whole world. Dally had spent 3 years on the wild side of New York, and had been arrested at the age of 10. He was tougher than the rest of us. Tougher, colder, meaner. The shade of difference that separates a greaser from a hood wasn't present in Dal. He was as wild as the boys in the downtown outfits, like Tim Shepard's gang. In New York, Dally blew off steam in gang fights, but here, organized gangs are rarities. They are just small bunches of friends who stick together, and warfare is between the social classes. A rumble, when it's called, is usually born of a grudge fight, and the opponents just happen to bring their friends along. Oh, and there are a few named gangs around, like the River Kings and the Tiber Street Tigers, but here, in the Southwest, there's no gang rivalry. So Dally, even though he could get into a good fight sometimes, had no specific thing to hate. No rival gang, only socias, and you can't win against them no matter how hard you try, because they've gotten all the breaks, and even whipping them isn't going to change the fact. Maybe that was why Dally was so bitter. So he's saying, like, you're never going to win against the socias. Like, they've got an easier life than us, and that might be why Dally's kind of so bitter toward them. So we know some more about some of our friends here. Dally, who kind of from a rough and tumble side of New York, and getting into gang fights and rumbles, they call them. He had quite a reputation. They have a file of him down in the police station. He'd been arrested, he got drunk, he rode in rodeos, lied, cheated, stole, rolled drunks, jumped small kids. He did everything. I didn't like him, but he was smart, and you had to respect him. Johnny Cade was last and least. If you can picture a little dark puppy that's been kicked too many times and is lost in a crowd of strangers, you'll have Johnny. So Johnny, remember, is the one that he talked about being beat up by the socias first, and then Ponyboy tells us about the socias beating him up. So Johnny's kind of he's got a hard life. He's kind of been kicked around a little. He was the youngest next to me, smaller than the rest, with a slight build. He had big black eyes and a dark tanned face. His hair was jet black and heavily greased and combed to the side, but it was so long that it fell in shaky bangs across his forehead. He had a nervous, suspicious look in his eyes, and that beating he got from the Socias didn't help matters. He was the gang's pet, everyone's kid brother. His father was always beating him up, and his mother ignored him, except when she was hacked off at something, and then you could hear her yelling at him clear down at our house. I think he hated that worse than getting whipped. He would have run away a million times if we hadn't been there. If it hadn't been for the gang, Johnny would never have known what love and affection are. So this is kind of a sad piece of Johnny's life that we learn. Like, his dad beats him up, his mom always yells at him, his only source for love and affection in this world are his friends. So he's really close to his friends and the gang, and it sounds like Johnny and Ponyboy are really close. Ponyboy talks pretty lovingly of Johnny. I wiped my eyes hurriedly. Did you catch him? Nope, they got away this time. The dirty... Two-Bit went on cheerfully, calling the Socias every name he could think of or make up. So Two-Bit came up with some colorful words to call the Socias here. The kids okay? I'm okay. I tried to think of something to say. I'm usually pretty quiet around people, even the gang. I changed the subject. I didn't know you were out of the cooler yet, Dally. So, out of the cooler yet, he means got out of jail. Good behavior. Got off early. Dallas lit a cigarette and handed it to Johnny. Everyone sat down to have a smoke and relax. A smoke always lessens the tension. I quit trembling and my color was back. The cigarette was calming me down. Two-Bit cocked an eyebrow. Nice looking bruise you got there, kid. I touched my cheek gingerly. Really? Two-Bit nodded sagely. Nice cut, too. Makes you look tough. Tough and tough are two different words, so they're spelled differently in your book. This is why it's important to follow along, because it's tough, T-O-U-G-H, that we usually spell it like, and tough, T-U-F-F. Tough, T-O-U-G-H, is the same as rough, and tough, T-U-F-F, means cool, sharp, like a tough-looking Mustang, or a tough record. In our neighborhood, both are compliments, so it's kind of cool to be tough in their neighborhood, no matter which way you use it. Steve flicked his ashes at me. What were you doing walking by your lonesome? Leave it to good old Steve to bring something up like that. I was coming home from the movies. I didn't think. You don't ever think, Derry broke in. Not at home or anywhere when it counts. You must think at school with all those good grades you bring home. And you've always got your nose in a book. But do you ever use your head for common sense? No sirree, bub. And if you did have to go by yourself, you should have carried a blade. I just stared at the hole in the toe of my tennis shoe. Me and Derry just didn't dig each other. I never could please him. He would have hollered at me for carrying a blade if I had carried one. If I brought home B's, he wanted A's. And if I got A's, he wanted to make sure they stayed A's. And if I was playing football, I should be studying. And if I was reading, I should be out playing football. He never hollered at Soda Pop, not even when Soda dropped out of school or got tickets for speeding. He just hollered at me. So Derry's kind of rough on his little brother, and I think some of you guys have felt this way before, where nothing's ever good enough. You know, if he's out playing football, he should be studying, and if he's in reading a book, he's like, what's wrong with you, kid? Get out and play some football. He just can't make his brother happy. But Derry never yells at Soda Pop like that. Soda Pop dropped out of school and he got speeding tickets, and he wasn't so tough on him. Soda was glaring at him. Leave my kid brother alone, you hear? This ain't his fault he likes to go to the movies. And it ain't his fault the Socials like to jump us. And if he had been carrying a blade, it would have been a good excuse to cut him to ribbons. So here we've got Soda coming to Ponyboy's defense. Soda always takes up for me. Derry said impatiently, when I want my kid brother to tell me what to do with my other kid brother, I'll ask you, kid brother. But he laid off me. He always does when Soda Pop tells him to. Most of the time. Next time, get one of us to go with you, Ponyboy, Two-Bit said. Any of us will. Speaking of movies, Dally yawned, flipping away his cigarette butt. I'm walking over to the Nightly Double tomorrow night. Anybody want to come and hunt some action? Steve shook his head. Me and Soda are picking up Evie and Sandy for the game. He didn't need to look at me the way he did right then. I wasn't going to ask if I can come. I'd never tell Soda because he really likes Steve a lot, but sometimes I can't stand Steve Randall. I mean it, sometimes I hate him. Derry sighed, just like I knew he would. Derry never had time to do anything anymore. I'm working tomorrow night. Dally looked at the rest of us. How about y'all? Two-Bit? Johnny Cake? You and Pony want to come? Me and Johnny will come, I said. I knew Johnny wouldn't open his mouth unless he was forced to. Okay, Derry? Yeah, since it ain't a school night. Derry was real good about letting me go places on the weekends. In school nights, I could hardly leave the house. I was planning on getting boozed up tomorrow night, Two-Bit said. If I don't, I'll walk over and find y'all. Steve was looking at Dally's hand. His ring, which he had rolled a drunk senior to get, was back on his finger. You break up with Sylvia again? Yeah, this time it's for good. That little broad was two-timing me again while I was in jail. I thought of Sylvia and Evie and Sandy and Two-Bit's many blondes. They were the only kind of girls that would look at us, I thought. Tough, loud girls who wore too much eye makeup and giggled and swore too much. I like Soda's girl Sandy just fine, though. Her hair was a natural blonde, and her laugh was soft, like her china blue eyes. She didn't have a real good home or anything, and was our kind, greaser, but she was a real nice girl. Still, lots of times I wondered what other girls were like. The girls who were bright-eyed and had their dresses a decent length and acted as if they'd like to spit on us if given a chance. Some were afraid of us, and remembering Dallas Winston, I didn't blame them. But most looked at us like we were dirt, gave us the same kind of look that the Socias did when they came by in their Mustangs and Corvairs and yelled, "Grease!" at us. I wondered about them. The girls, I mean. Did they cry when their boys were arrested, like Evie did when Steve got hauled in? Or did they run out on them the way Sylvia did Dallas? But maybe their boys didn't get arrested, or beaten up, or busted up in rodeos. I was still thinking about it when I was doing my homework that night. I had to read Great Expectations for English. And that kid, Pip, he reminded me of us. The way he felt marked lousy because he wasn't a gentleman or anything. And the way that girl kept looking down on him. That happened to me once. One time in biology, I had to dissect a worm, and the razor wouldn't cut, so I used my switchblade. The minute I flicked it out, I forgot what I was doing, or I would have never done it. This girl, right beside me, kind of gasped and said, "They are right. You are a hood." That didn't make me feel so hot. They were a lot like Socias in that class, and I get put into A classes because I'm supposed to be smart. And most of them thought it was pretty funny. I didn't, though. She was a cute girl. She looked real good in yellow. We deserve a lot of our trouble, I thought. Dallas deserves everything he gets, and should get worse if you want the truth. And Two-Bit, he doesn't really want or need half the things he swipes from the store. He just thinks it's fun to swipe everything that isn't nailed down. I can understand why Soda Pop and Steve get into drag races and fights so much, though both of them have too much energy, too much feeling, with no way to blow it off. "Rub harder, Soda," I heard Derry mumbling. "You're going to put me to sleep." I looked through the door. Soda Pop was giving Derry a back rub. Derry's always pulling muscles. He roofs houses, and he's always trying to carry 2 bundles of roofing up the ladder. I knew Soda would put him to sleep, because Soda can put about anyone out when he sets his head to it. He thought Derry worked too hard anyway. I did too. Derry didn't deserve to work like an old man when he was only 20. He had been a real popular guy in school. He was the captain of the football team. He had been voted Boy of the Year. But we just didn't have the money for him to go to college, even with the athletic scholarship he won. And now, he didn't even have the time between jobs to think about college. So he never went anywhere and never did anything anymore, except work out at gyms and go skiing with some old friends of his sometimes. I rubbed on my cheek where it had turned purple. I'd looked in the mirror, and it did make me look tough. But Derry had made me put a Band-Aid on the cut. I remembered how awful Johnny had looked when he got beaten up. I had just as much right to use the streets as the Socias did, and Johnny had never hurt them. Why did the Socias hate us so much? We left them alone. I nearly went to sleep over my homework trying to figure it out. Soda Pop, who had jumped into bed by this time, yelled sleepily for me to turn off the light and get to bed. When I finished the chapter I was on, I did. Lying beside Soda, staring at the wall, I kept remembering the faces of the Socs as they surrounded me. That blue madras shirt the blonde was wearing, I could still hear a thick voice. Need a haircut, greaser? I shivered. You cold, pony boy? A little, I lied. Soda threw one arm across my neck. He mumbled something drowsily. Listen, kiddo, when Derry hollers at you, he don't mean nothing. He's just got more worries than someone his age ought to. Don't take him serious. You dig, pony boy? Don't let him bug you. He's really proud of you because you're so brainy. It's just because you're the baby. I mean, he loves you a lot. Savvy? Sure, I said, trying for Soda's sake to keep the sarcasm out of my voice. Soda? Yeah? How come you dropped out? I've never gotten over that. I could hardly stand it when he left school. 'Cause I'm dumb. The only things I was passing anyway were auto mechanics and gym. You're not dumb. Yeah, I am. Shut up and I'll tell you something. Don't tell Derry, though. Okay. I think I'm gonna marry Sandy. After she gets out of school and I get a better job and everything. I might wait till you get out of school, though, so I can still help Derry with the bills and stuff. Tough enough. Wait until I get out, though, so you can keep Derry off my back. Don't be like that, kid. I told you he don't mean half of the stuff he says. You in love with Sandy? What's it like? He sighed happily. It's real nice. In a moment, his breathing was light and regular. I turned my head to look at him, and in the moonlight, he looked like some Greek god come to earth. I wondered how he could stand being so handsome. Then I sighed. I didn't quite get what he meant about Derry. Derry thought I was just another mouth to feed and somebody to holler at. Derry love me? I thought of those hard, pale eyes. Soda was wrong for once, I thought. Derry doesn't love anyone or anything, except maybe Soda. I didn't hardly think of him as being human. I don't care, I lied to myself. I don't care about him either. Soda's enough, and I'll have him until I get out of school. I don't care about Derry. But I was still lying, and I knew it. I lie to myself all the time, but I never believe me. So that's the end of chapter 1. We meet our characters, a lot of our gang characters. Ponyboy's walking home from the movies, gets jumped by the Socs. They beat him up pretty bad, but his gang comes to save him. We get to know more about the brothers and their relationship. Their parents passed away in a car crash, and they're kind of on their own. We see that Derry's pretty hard on Ponyboy, and Soda Pop always stands up for him. And at the very end of the chapter there, Soda's trying to tell him, like, he really just wants the best for you, because you're really smart, and he knows you can be better than the rest of us. So that's where Derry's coming from. Pony doesn't believe it. He tries to tell himself, I don't care about him, he doesn't love me. But he's lying to himself, and he knows it. He knows that Derry loves him, and he knows he loves Derry back. So those are some things we find out about in the first chapter. I hope you guys like it so far. Make sure to fill out your study guides and turn those in on Google Classroom, and get outside and read for a couple days. It's beautiful out when the sun is shining. You should get outside, get some fresh air, and let me know what you think. And let me know what you've been up to, because I miss you guys. See ya!